It's Wednesday evening. You're listening to Mystic Moon Cafe with Wendy Schindler and Travis Short. Every week, we will interview guests that are experts in various fields of the supernatural, paranormal, unexplained, and esoteric. So sit back and let us take you on a journey to educate, enlighten, and entertain as we broaden your horizons. Now, here's your hosts, Wendy Schindler and Travis Short.
Well, good evening, everyone. Got Travis Short
Yes.
and Wendy Schindler here. How you doing, Travis?
You know the answer to that question. You know what kind of week I've been having.
That's kind of a loaded question. Okay, yeah, let's don't go there.
We're not even going to go there. I'm great. We'll leave it at that. How are you?
I'm just finer than frog's hair.
Now that's a saying I thought only existed in my part of the world.
Oh, no, not at all. But then again, Grandpa Schindler came from down by Louisville, Kentucky a long time ago.
See, it kind of did.
Mm-hmm.
So
very possibly, but it could have been the other ones too from the St. Louis, St. Charles area, the other side. So
okay, I'm still going to claim that I'm claiming it's from my neck of the woods. So
the Appalachian Trail.
The Appalachian Trail, yes. No, seriously, how are things in the great state of Missouri?
Miserable. No, it was 75 degrees today, sunny.
Yes, same thing here, about 80.
Pardon?
About 80 here.
Woo! I think we might get a little rain. We might not. It's supposed to cool off, though. It's supposed to get real strong north winds and cool off for the weekend. And I've got to, my friend June, you know June, she's been on our show.
I know June.
Yeah.
Yes.
Her mother passed away last week, and she's
sorry.
coming in Saturday night, and then Sunday we have the whole funeral and then the graveside service and all of those things. So it's a little... I'm sad for her. I didn't really know Joyce that well, but Joyce Prophet Nixon passed away, and it was very sad.
Well, I'm very sorry. Please pass my condolences on to June.
I will do so.
Please do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we've had, it's been like 80 degrees here. I've been running the air conditioner in my car.
Mm-hmm.
Ran the air conditioner last night at the hotel. We did get rain last night, rain most of today. It was only, I don't know, probably mid 60s to high 70s, I guess today. But yeah, it's just been unseasonably warm weather for February. I mean, typically February, we're getting pounded with snowstorms here in Virginia. So it's just been a very, very unusual kind of weather. But we got a great show tonight.
Yes, we do.
I know, looking very forward. I always look forward to having our guest on tonight. He's, there's those guests that we have that kind of, ships passing in the night kind of thing. We have them occasionally, maybe only one time. Then we have our old regulars like Bill Bean, Andrea Perrin, and of course Nick Redfern tonight. And very excited to have Nick back on. He is always an entertaining guest. He's also very educational. Always find out some new interesting stuff. So looking forward to what he's going to bring to the table tonight. Nick is actually, I'll go ahead and do his bio. And
okay.
I think we've got a song we're going to play, and then we're going to bring him on.
Right. Well, we'll try anyway. We know how Skype likes to misbehave on me, but hopefully Lisa's computer will behave better.
And this is not my week for technical issues. This has just not been the best week.
Well, Carly is listening live, and she says you sound great. Apparently, okay. I sound like Minnie Mouse again.
Well, there's nothing wrong with sounding like Minnie Mouse. There's nothing wrong. She is a very strong component in American culture and pop culture and even her literary culture, if you want to stretch the imagination so far. But
absolutely, yes. I think, Minnie Mouse or Carly?
Either or. I'm easy.
No,
and we're not even going to have that conversation.
No, we won't go there.
But we do have Nick back on the show tonight. We're very excited. Nick is the author of over 30 books. They covers the genres of UFOs, Bigfoot, lake monsters, the abominable snowman, other cryptids, Hollywood scandals. He has a contract with 3 books for New Page Publishing. He's been on and talked about the first 2, Weapons of the Gods and Bloodline of Gods. The third in that series is actually one he's going to be talking about tonight, which is called Immortality of the Gods. The Monster Files, The Real Men in Black, The NASA Conspiracies, Keep Out, The Pyramids and the Pentagon. So many great books that he's written, and I actually have almost all of them and have read all of them. He's appeared on many television shows, including Fox News, BBC's Out of This World, the Sci-Fi Channel's Proof Positive, Space Channel's Fields of Fear, History Channel's Monsters Quest, which is another one of my favorites, America's Book of Secrets, Science, The Unexplained Files, National Geographic Channel's Paranatural, MSNBC's Countdown with Keith Olbermann, and one of my all-time favorite shows, everyone knows, Ancient Aliens. He is a regular contributor on that particular program, so always love hearing his views on the UFO phenomena and other supernatural events. He's originally from the UK. He lives on the fringes of Dallas, Texas, which is, by most definitions, the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Right. Beautiful area. Been there several times. Love it. He can be contacted through his blog, Nick Redfern, Fortean.blogspot.com. But he is going to be coming out tonight. We have 2 great books that he's going to be talking about. One is called 365 Days of UFOs. It's a year of alien encounters. It's a great coffee table book. It's got literally 365 different UFO and alien encounters for every day, every year, every decade. It's great to sit down. You just want to choose a day at random and find out about it. It's great to go through. I like looking up, a UFO encounter on my birthday, and you can do it by month, you can do it by day, you can do it by year. It's a great piece of trivial information. And then the other one, as I mentioned, is Immortality of the Gods, Legends, Mysteries, and Alien Connection to Eternal Life through New Page Publishing. Both of these books are available. He'll be talking about those. He'll tell you where you can get them tonight. We're going to bring Nick on in just a moment. You've got a song you're going to play for us. Who are we highlighting and spotlighting tonight?
I believe we're going to go once again with Shaman's Harvest, The Devil's Gift, actually. It was about all that Carly had to offer me, so it's all she could find, and I'm not at home, so I couldn't shoot her another one real quick.
Okay, no problem. I like all of their stuff, and I like the particular title of this song. It sounds like it will be interesting.
She's going to mute us while it plays, and then we'll get Nick on the line, hopefully, and we'll go from there. She'll give us our countdown again, and woohoo! There we go. Yay! All right, roll the song, Carly.
Don't feel so bad, 'cause I'm gonna make it alright. Isn't it sad that we've got to turn out the lights? And if you sign your name on the dotted line, I'm gonna take you back home. If you're coming in the front door asking for trouble, come up in the back, I'll be showing you in double. Better take a minute, I promise you are gonna thank me. See, I'm a real cold dude who likes to take
All right, we're back, and we do have Nick Redfern on the line. Once again, good evening, Nick. How you doing?
Well, we had Nick.
Hello?
Oh, there you
hello.
Go. I don't know what happened then. It kind of just went, it was like it had been muted for a second.
Yeah. Well, we've got that 3-second delay in case you happen to use some kind of curse word or something, which, you know,
Oh, okay.
I fucking do all the time. Oh, sorry about that. It's great to have you back on, Nick.
Oh, thanks.
I've done your intro, but I'll do a real quick recap, just real quickly. We've got 2 new books out, and we kind of want to talk about both of them, and we'll probably just kind of jump back and forth. Because there's a little bit of parallel between the two because they both deal with the concept of UFOs and aliens. One of them is the third in your trilogy that you did for New Page Books called Immortality of the Gods, Legends, Mysteries, and the Alien Connection to Eternal Life. And that is the follow-up to The Bloodline of the Gods and Weapons of the Gods. And then you've got another one, which I kind of term it a tabletop coffee table book. It's 365 Days of UFOs and Alien Encounters. And it really is just kind of literally you can pick it up and choose any day, any year, any decade and try and basically get a real good thumbnail sketch of any type of UFO and alien encounter for the past, 100 years or so, looking back to some of the ones that you've outlined. So a lot of interesting stuff to cover here. So we just thank you so much. You're always a great guest. I said early on that, we have those guests that are one-time guests. They come on, they talk about something, and they don't ever come back. They think this is like the 3rd time that you've been on the show. So we're very grateful to having you back on with us. You're always fun. That's what I said. You're always enlightening, you're entertaining, and you're educational. And that are, those are 3 of the best qualities you can look for in a guest.
Well, that's good to know.
And an all-around good person too. That helps. Yeah.
Okay, suck up. I was sticking with the professional, but okay, fine. Yeah, he's an all-around good person too, and you've got that great British accent. So I mean, all the way, it's kind of comes full circle. It's great. It's the total package. So that's awesome. So.
All right, good.
let's start with Immortality of the Gods because that kind of rounds out your 3-book contract with New Page, correct?
Well, it wasn't sort of a 3-book contract. It was just more the fact that I did Bloodline of the Gods, and there were a couple of other areas that I was interested in potentially doing books on. But although I'm interested in the ancient astronaut phenomenon, there's a lot of books have been written about that subject in the past where if I was to write about some of those similar subjects, it would just basically be rehashing somebody else's books, which, nobody wants to do that. If you're a writer, you want to be able to do something original. So basically, the 3 books that I wrote for New Page, it wasn't so much like a 3-book contract. It was just, I suggested 3 ideas to them that really appealed to me. And then I thought, well, a trilogy would be sort of a cool way to start it, but also end it as well, sort of hopefully go out on a high in that subject of ancient astronauts and then go on to something else to sort of stay, varied and not just get caught up in a rut of having to keep delivering of the gods of this one or of the gods of that,
Right.
And, just sort of just mix it up, which is what I like to do. I don't like to sort of get caught up in just writing books on one subject forever and a day. I mean, if people want to do that, that's fine. If they got enough new material as well, that's even better. But for me, I think I'd get burned out sort of doing 10 ancient astronaut books. And as I said, there's probably a lot of aspects of that phenomenon that there would be no point in me doing it because it's already been done. So, that's one of the things I always think about when you're planning on writing a book. I always sort of put myself in the position of the reader as well, because I'm not just a writer of books, I'm a reader of books as well. So I try and look at it from the perspective of a reader. What would the reader like? What would interest them? What could I do that's new? And sort of, take that approach and then see what the publishers think about it.
Well, obviously they liked it, and I was going to say, you were saying, you don't want to have this of the gods and that of the gods, because after a while it becomes the boredom of the gods. It's the same, the same thing, and no one does want that. What I love about these three books in particular is it does kind of stray for you a little bit from the subject matter that you were known for, which tends to be more of just the unknown supernatural and the cryptozoological, because that's where a lot of your previous works kind of fell into that genre. So what I liked about this was seeing you, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but stretch your own comfort zone and talking about things that I hadn't heard you or read you really discuss before.
Well, yeah, I mean, my big interest of all is cryptozoology, which for people who aren't aware of is the study of unknown animals like Bigfoot, the Loch Ness Monster, Chupacabra, things like that. And I guess it's my main interest for several reasons. One, I've always sort of been interested in that topic anyway, and when I was a kid, my parents took me on a week's vacation to Scotland, and we spent a day at Loch Ness, and my dad told me the story of the Loch Ness Monster. It got me interested, sort of little kid running around the shore, hoping to see this long neck surface, which actually didn't, but that didn't matter, But the other reason is because, I enjoy expeditions and road trips and that kind of thing, and that kind of lends itself more, cryptozoology sort of lends itself more to road trips and expeditions than UFOs do. Typically with the UFO subjects, I often get a lot of cases, but they might have occurred 2 weeks ago or something, and other than interview the witness, which is obviously a very important part of it, you're not able to sort of do much more because the thing was here and then it was gone. But if you're talking about like a lake monster, you can sort of stake out the lake for weeks or, however long you want to go for and see if you can find something, because if there's something there, it's going to be sort of locked in there, So it's sort of the investigations of sort of UFO stuff is sort of a very different approach to, investigating like a Bigfoot in the woods or whatever.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was going to ask you, in researching books on the UFO phenomena, do you find yourself incorporating the same journalistic approach, or did you alter it a little bit?
Well, I try to. I guess typically if I'm writing a book on cryptozoology, I do write it in a different way to like Immortality of the Gods, which is sort of a straightforward journalistic approach of telling the story, the historical angle and things like that. But whereas with the cryptozoology books, I try and write those as the expedition happened, like in a diary format. So whereas the Immortality of the Gods might be, telling a story from 300 years ago or 2,000 years ago, and telling it from a factual basis, the cryptozoology books, I tend to write them as the expedition happens. So, the opening words might be something like, not literally like this, but kind of along the lines of, it was a dark and stormy night and I jumped in the car, hit the accelerator and headed off into the woods looking for Bigfoot. I try and, hopefully try and get the reader sort of immersed into not just the story, but the theme and the feel of the expedition, everything from reaching the woods and, finding the first night, whatever, you lost or in the woods, you got to sleep in the car that night or whatever, So I try and make it where people can sort of relate to it and sort of see themselves there, as part of the story.
Well, I think that's really an important aspect of telling those particular stories, and that's what I do love, because I did notice that the writing style, and I know a lot of that is editing and the publisher and things like that, but the writing style is very different for you. When I read, Weapons of the Gods, Bloodline of the Gods, and Immortality of the Gods, it's almost a different narrative voice.
Yeah, and I think really you have to do that because, if you're talking about an ancient mystery from, say, 3000 BC, really you can only tell the story from the perspective of the facts and the legends such as they are. But if you're investigating something, like I said, in the jungles or the rainforests or whatever, and it's ongoing right now, then it does really allow you to ride it in a different way, because you've constantly got new information coming in, whereas something from 5,000 years ago, we're pretty much stuck with what we've got now, unless something really amazing and new turns up,
Absolutely. Now, just real quickly, kind of, I guess, as a springboard for us, let's give folks kind of a chronological perspective here. You did Weapons of the God first, I believe, followed by Bloodline of the Gods, and then rounding it out with Immortality of the Gods.
No, actually, Bloodline was the first one.
Bloodline was first. Okay, I'm sorry.
And Weapons was the second one, and then Immortality was the third one, yeah.
So what kind of what was the impetus for Bloodline of the Gods, and did the other two kind of spring from that, or did you already have these three concepts already kind of formulating in your mind?
Well, what happened was that as I said, I'm interested in the whole issue of the ancient astronauts, but as I said, there's a ton of things that have already been written about, and there's no point doing them, trying to just copying somebody else. But there was one area that really sort of interested me, and I realized that no one had ever done a book on it. And this is a study of the people who have what's called Rh negative blood. Their blood is actually quite significantly different to the rest of the population. It's just a small percentage of the population who have this Rh negative, which is sort of takes its name, the Rh, from the rhesus factor. What's interesting is that although the worldwide percentage of people who are Rh negative is extremely low, the number of people within ufology, like abductees and contactees and people who've had experiences who are also Rh negative, their figures are actually extremely high, and they have some interesting physical differences between the rest of the population as well. So it kind of takes us down the path of what we might call like an extraterrestrial bloodline that, possibly tens, hundreds of thousands of years ago was a certain aspect of the human race sort of genetically altered. And are we unknowingly today, seeing the results of it with the Rh negative? So I presented the idea to New Page and said, you're always on the lookout for new ideas. Well, here's a new angle for the for the idea that of ancient astronauts may have somehow genetically manipulated us in the past. And one of the other big interests I had was this issue of whether or not in the distant past there was like ancient nuclear war, sort of civilizations coming in cycles, and possibly with a degree of alien intervention as well. And that was another one I was always fascinated by, and really it'd been mentioned in books and chapters in books, but not really to the extent of a full-length book just on the issue of sort of ancient nuclear war and alien intervention. So, and then because I'd done the two, and New Page liked them, I thought, well, it would make sense if I could come up with a third one, just to turn it into a trilogy. I think people sometimes like trilogies. Mm-hmm. And again, the other one that I thought of was this issue of immortality, but to take it a little bit of a step further, where rather than just concentrating solely on the past, what I would do would sort of begin in the past and then sort of head right through to the present day and draw parallels between these claims of immortality, in ancient texts going back thousands of years, and see how they sort of mirror what people are reporting today.
And you do, like I said, I've just finished Immortality of the Gods. I got it a couple of weeks ago, and did finish it. And I love the way that you look at historically and culturally the various legends, myths, and stories of individuals who have had extremely long lives, including, individuals like Enoch and Methuselah from the Bible, and then into other cultures, other stories from folklore and legends about this quest for eternal life, this quest for immortality. What, in your research, as you were putting this together, what commonalities and what common threads did you find?
Well, I mean, that's a good question, because that does sort of get to the heart of what the book's about. For example, you can find throughout numerous cultures around the world, going back thousands and thousands of years, accounts where, you know, the gods were perceived as immortal. You know, everybody kind of knows that. That's, you know, anybody who has any kind of like a religious belief system in a god or gods, you know, the gods lived forever. Sort of less well known is that some of the gods would sort of give humans that they interacted with a degree of immortality as well, or extensive lifespans. And what's interesting, you know, when you talk about cultures around the world, is the fact you can find this throughout all pretty much cultures, how that there was some sort of almost like a magical potion or an elixir which, when taken, would alter the person's body chemistry, so to speak, to where the aging process would either slow down or it would come to a complete halt. For example, you know, with the Greek gods, you had ambrosia, this magical drink, essentially, or cocktail, however you want to describe it, that, you know, the gods would take, and people, you know, it was bestowed on, so to speak, that if you kept taking the ambrosia, you know, you wouldn't age. Now, in ancient India, there are similar stories where the gods would ingest this substance called amrita, and it would have the same effect. If you look at biblical accounts, when the Israelites were leaving on the exodus out of Egypt, and, you know, they're in the desert and starving, this mysterious substance fell from the skies known as manna. And the same thing crops up in ancient Egypt as well, and also in ancient China, where there are these mysterious drinks, liquids, etc., that, as I said, had an effect on the human body. So I think it's important that when you look at these stories from all around the world, from cultures completely unconnected, and yet they all have stories of these fantastic beings coming down from the sky and giving them immortality, you know. And when you get that so many times, you begin to think, well, maybe this isn't just, you know, folklore or the equivalent of a fairy tale or whatever. You know, there may be actually some science behind it.
Well, it's interesting because very early in the book, like in the very first chapter, you start talking about this process of ingesting the immortality, and then you do an excellent job of explaining from a scientific standpoint, you know, what this very well could be, and I do want to get to that. But I do think it's very interesting that when you look at these cultures, there is this quest for immortality, this quest for eternal life, this quest for youth, and almost always it is by ingesting some external, quote unquote, alien substance.
Yeah, that's right. And that's one of the interesting things. It doesn't matter, you know, if one's called amrita, you know, the one's called manna, you know, another's ambrosia. I think if you look at the legends and the tales and the folklore, they've clearly been distorted over time based around sort of cultural beliefs of different areas of the world. But it does come down to that sort of core belief system that, you know, the gods or the aliens, however you want to term them, had uncovered the secrets of, you know, extensive life. And, you know, we look at them, I guess, from the perspective of gods, and maybe, you know, maybe they were, but on the other hand, maybe it was science that, you know, gave them this image, if you like, of the gods, because while the rest of the people were sort of getting by on their measly 85 years or whatever, you know, the gods were never aging and never changing, and they just, you know, they look the same forever. Now, on the science angle you mentioned, although we haven't sort of cracked the code of immortality, you know, and I think under normal circumstances, probably, even though we are living to, you know, more lengthier ages over time, I think sort of, you know, 90 is sort of pushing the limit, you know, to have a sort of fruitful life. You get beyond that, and, well, not many people do get beyond that. So, you know, I think we'll push it further and further a little bit. but it's not going to change much more, I don't think, now, unless there's some radical intervention. Now, we know why people age. It's due to something which is called the Hayflick limit. And basically, it deals with how and why cells age. And what happens is that this is the same case for everybody. Roughly between about 3 dozen and 5 dozen times in a person's lifetime, the cells of the body replicate and divide. Now, what happens after that period of replication and division is that they don't divide anymore. And what happens is that that's when the process of aging starts to speed up and essentially becomes irreversible. Now, if we could figure out how to ensure that the cells didn't stop replicating and didn't stop dividing, then potentially at least we could slow down the aging process where, you know, what we see as 1 year today, we may be able to sort of stave off aging so we don't change for 10 years, you know. So in other words, somebody who lives to 90 eventually could, you know, live for a few centuries. You know, it's actually not out of the question. It's not a case that we don't understand the science. It's kind of like we don't have the technology to make that change. You know, it's kind of like if you were to time travel a car back 200 years, the people after a time would probably understand how the car works. You know, they'd know what the steering wheel was and the wheels, etc. But if there was no gasoline in the engine, and the gasoline back 200 years ago couldn't be replicated, it wouldn't start. But they would have an understanding that it was a vehicle. And that's kind of like where we're at. We don't have the science to achieve immortality, but we know what we have to try and do to get there, but we don't have the technology to do that yet.
Well, I think, you know, coming from trying to marry religious and scientific perspective, the religious side is going to say that, you know, mankind, having been quote unquote created in the likeness of God, was supposed to have been immortal, and then because of the fall, we lost that, and it's been a quest ever since to regain something that was supposed to have been ours. So I think even if you take that religious perspective and angle out, you have to look at the fact that somewhere within our consciousness, we know that we're supposed to be able to live longer, or that we can live longer.
Yeah, and I think, you know, again, a subject like this is sort of very emotive and controversial because, you know, some people do have very sort of highly cherished, you know, religious beliefs. Mm-hmm. Other people take the view it's aliens, and you can understand why, you know, you get a debate going. Sometimes it gets a bit fiery, you know. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with that because we're all looking for answers as to what's actually going on. But no, you're right. You know, that you can look back into a lot of these old stories and legends and so on, and, you know, find or make a case that this was something bestowed on us in like a supernatural sort of religious perspective. Other people would say, you know, with the stories of the gods and the, you know, the taking human wives and that kind of thing, and then the birth of these demigods, you know, half human, half gods. Some people would place that in sort of like an alien hybrid kind of connection. So I think it really depends on what perspective a person comes from. But the important thing is, regardless of which way you look at it, religion or extraterrestrials, it still comes down to the idea that the core belief on both sides is that in some way or another, immortality may be achievable.
No, absolutely. And the reason I brought up the religious angle was, you know, it dawned on me as we were talking about this ingesting immortality. I mean, that is at the very heart of, you know, the Catholic Eucharist and communion. You know, if you eat the wafer and you drink the blood, then you will have eternal life. So it is one of those common threads that seems to run through many cultures, many religions, of ingesting something that gives us eternal life. Even the quest for the fountain of youth is the quest for, you know, a place, a source where there is a liquid, you know, or something that can be drank, that can be ingested, that would then reverse the aging process.
And you're right. when you look at that, people either there's one or two things you can do. You can write it off as just coincidence that all these different places all around the world had very similar beliefs, or the reasons why they've all got similar stories is because back then, everybody kind of knew that this was going on, and then over time, over thousands of years, the stories got distorted or lost, and today we just have fragments of it, whereas back then it may have been, almost an accepted thing that if you were in the God's favors, you had a chance of living longer.
I like this concept much more than the concept of Botox.
Well, I guess things like, not that I'm an expert on these things, but things like Botox and having your face pulled back where it looks like you're stood in a windstorm, it's, I don't really see that as, or dyeing your hair black if it's grey. I don't really see the point, because that's not really going to give you immortality. You might look different on the outside, right, but, whatever's going on the inside, that's not going to change, that's not going to slow down.
But it is absolutely amazing how much of our society is obsessed with the looking younger, even if they aren't. And I think that is at the heart of this concept of the immortality of the gods. Now, you do mention something that I found very interesting, and you jump right into it very early on, and that is about white gold.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is an angle, again, which, sort of revolves around, what we would call ingestion, really, but in a very sort of, almost sort of like strange and alternative fashion. This is something that actually, the one person more than any other that's really done a lot of really good work in this field is Jim Mars, and Jim is someone who, he's probably more known for conspiracy work, like the JFK assassination and right, UFOs and secret societies. But the whole issue of gold as it relates to immortality is very intriguing. It revolves around something known as white powder gold, and essentially it also revolves around the issue of alchemy. Now, alchemy is this sort of ancient secret that certain mystics, so to speak, understood, whereas to everybody else, gold is just gold. But they had found a way to actually sort of transmutate it. Alchemy is sort of the alleged science of changing what are called base metals like tin and lead into precious metals like silver and gold. And the whole issue with white powder gold is that in sort of an alchemical altered state, it can be, in a refined alchemical state, it can be essentially ingested, so to speak, as something along the lines of ambrosia or amrita. And in fact, it may actually be a distortion upon, one phenomenon. Maybe white powder gold was the answer to all of these things, but they gave them different names. But, today a lot of people call it high-spin monatomic gold powder, but it's basically the same. And but what's interesting is a lot of research is being done today into how gold can actually have a particular effect, for example, on cancer cells. And it sounds, when I describe it, you might think it sounds really scientific, but it can be explained quite easily. A lot of research is being done at Rice University in Texas, and what they've done essentially is to take cancer patients and inject them with small spheres which are wrapped in gold. Now, what happens is that what are called nanoparticles exit the bloodstream, and they focus all their attention upon the cancerous tumour. And infrared light's then blasted onto the tumour, which allows the gold's nanoparticles to change the light into heat, and the heat then causes the obliteration of the tumour. And this is all done by using gold in a very alternative fashion. So the fact that we're now using gold, albeit in a different way to sort of the white powder gold angle, although we're still using gold, this new fashion to kill off cancer cells. So, this sort of demonstrates, the more we look into some of these ancient stories about gold supposedly, giving us health and rejuvenating us, it sounds bizarre, but then you realize we're actually starting to do this research now, and, thankfully it's making sort of good leaps as well.
When you talk about the concept of the white powder gold, though, when you start the chapter, you actually kind of draw some parallels to the work of Zecharia Sitchin and the Anunnaki and their obsession with gold, and how that it kind of has this underlying interest in what are deemed as, I'm not going to call them extraterrestrials or gods, but these, we'll say, perceived immortal entities that had some impact on human society and human culture in some form or fashion, but that there was this great interest in their part on gold. And you also even mentioned in there the use of gold in repairing problems in the atmosphere and the ozone and things like that.
Yeah, well, Zecharia Sitchin, who sort of did more work than anybody in the field of the Anunnaki. Now, the Anunnaki, I've spoken to some people, and they assumed that because Sitchin wrote so much about them, that he was sort of the first person to do so. But, I mean, the reality of the situation is that the Anunnaki, that there's nothing actually new about them. They were sort of major deities in ancient Sumeria. And but it was Sitchin, really, who sort of brought things into the modern era and kick-started the idea that the Anunnaki were not gods or deities, anything like that, from thousands of years ago, but they were visiting extraterrestrials. And he made this connection, as you said, between the Anunnaki and gold. Now, the one angle, which ironically, again, with another gold parallel that we're now looking into, Sitchin believed that their home planet was degrading, and the atmosphere wasn't what it was, and so they came to the Earth to mine the planet for gold, and the purpose being to essentially mine and pillage all this gold and then refine it into powdered form and literally sort of release, millions of tons of this gold powder into the planet's atmosphere to essentially plug holes in the same way that we're now thinking about trying to plug holes in the ozone layer. And ironically, one of the 20th century's most brilliant scientists, Dr. Edward Teller, he also came up with this idea of using sort of like millions of tons of metal dust, again, to try and fill the holes in the ozone layer. So, it's kind of like, what goes around comes around. But the other angle that Sitchin was focused on too was kind of this white powder gold angle, because one of the things he noted was that, according, again, to the old stories, the Anunnaki had massive lifespans. And Sitchin, again, thought, the probability was that the Anunnaki had found some way either to achieve immortality or to slow the aging process where you would still die. But, I mean, no one's going to complain if you age really slowly and you live to be 100,000 or something. So Sitchin was really responsible, for beginning a lot of these accounts, and he made some good points, and again drew parallels. It wasn't just a theory. He drew in, the idea as to why gold had become so important back then, and why we view it so important today. It's so valuable because it happens to be gold, but there's no real reason why it has to be so valuable to us. It's just we perceive it as being, valuable and expensive. But if you ask people why is it expensive and a sheet of aluminum isn't, nobody's really got an answer. It's just
exactly.
Because, gold is expensive, it is valuable. But if you look back into the reasons why, it very often goes back to the tales of the gods.
Yes. Like I say, if we can change that perception, I would be a billionaire. If we could get aluminum
Oh man!
Now I was gonna I in that same kind of dark sense of humor that I have, ingesting gold. Nick, does Goldschlager count?
Yes, it does.
Do we think that? Because as you were talking about these elixirs and cocktails that give eternal life, I'm going, I have done my fair share of research in this particular topic.
Well, it beats a bottle of milk, you know what I mean?
Yes, it does.
Exactly. Exactly. Now,
Travis, it will at least make you talk to God on the porcelain commode.
I have had that conversation many times. Now, as we go through, Nick, like I said, I just finished The Immortality of the Gods, and it's not a huge book. I'm trying to see real quickly how many pages. Looks like
250 pages, something like that. I think something like that.
Yeah, it looks like your conclusion. 204 with the ends the conclusions, and the bibliography brings in like at 220 something. So it's not a huge book, but there is so much information that you pack in here.
Sometimes I write different books in different ways. The one you just mentioned, Immortality of the Gods, is roughly 200 pages. 365 Days of UFOs, which has just come out as well, he's more than 400 pages. But my view has always been that, if you're going to write about a story, sometimes the story you're telling is so extensive that, it lends itself to a longer book. But when you're dealing with something from the past, from thousands of years ago, typically we are on a limit on what we know, and we're on a limit as far as we can take the story. Or you take what I consider to be the wrong approach, which is you just endlessly speculate on things that, is so hazy, it's really not worth speculating on. So that's why Immortality is a little bit shorter, because I used all the information available and sort of, literally got as much as I could. But what I didn't want to do was then just go out on like a speculative limb when there's no actual even circumstantial evidence or circumstantial theories, and it just becomes like filler, which I don't like to do. So I feel that if you're dealing with something that is limited data, but you can get all of that limited data, into a book, which may be shorter than another one, that's the right way to do it. Don't just make it 300 pages because you feel you've got to make it 300 pages. Now, if a book lends itself to 300 pages, or like the 365 Days books, which is 400 pages, then that's the way to do it as well. It really is dependent on how much you've got to say. There's nothing worse than somebody just waffling on about hazy concepts and nothing to back it up. That's actually worse than trimming 50 pages off.
No, you're right.
Trimming 50 pages off, is actually better than just listening to somebody drone on about stuff that's clearly padding, for the sake of trying to make a few pages up.
Well, I think two things in that regard. I think first of all, one of the things I love about Immortality of the Gods, and you're right. 365 Days of UFO Encounters, it is about 200 pages longer, but it's done in a very different type of storytelling. Yeah. You may have 3 UFO encounters on one page, just because what you're doing is giving a snapshot of that event and giving as much information as you can. Whereas in Immortality of the Gods, you do this great job of packing very, very pertinent information. And, I love the way that you weave in the historical as well as the scientific as well as personal perspectives from other individuals. But you also have this amazing job of taking material that would be in many ways otherwise difficult to grasp and turning into a very conversational tone and making it so easy to read and understand.
Well, I think that's an important issue. It's like when I mentioned, the cancer treatments at Rice University, that was probably, even for me, one of the hardest bits to write, because you want to get all the facts there, and you want to get it across to the reader in a way that we can all understand it, but you don't want it to be so complex that the person's like, what on earth does this mean? You know. So I think it's important to to write in a fashion that's sort of lucid and informative, but also, when you're dealing with science and technology and medicine, the responsibility is there to balance, how you write it. So, that it's entertaining as well as informative. Not, you don't want it to. You want the facts, but you don't want it to read like, you're reading some sort of like a university textbook. Which,
exactly. That's what I was. That's what I was going to say. It's not like reading a textbook. It's like. It is very much like, even just in talking with you, that's what I love about the interviews with you, is you're very conversational. It's like, we could be having this conversation at a pub or a bar over a drink, and some, pub snack food, and it would still have the same weight and severity as it does reading a book. It's just done in a very conversational tone. It's not condescending. You're not beating people over the head. No. And what I do love is that you do very, very early on in every one of these particular books, you address the fact that you are being respectful of individuals' personal beliefs, but you are simply trying to take historical incidents and shed them in a different light and give a slightly different angle and perspective on them. And that particular perspective coming from the ancient alien, quote unquote, ancient alien perspective.
Well, yeah, and I think there's a reason why I do that, because none of us, when we talk about immortality and death and things like that, and I hate to make it sound like a downer, you know what I mean? But when you're talking about things like death and immortality, at the end of the day, none of us really know what the truth is. I actually do think something survives bodily death, but. And no disrespect is meant when I say this, but to me, the idea of a guy in a long robe and a beard hovering above a cloud or something, to me, I can't accept that. But I can accept the science that maybe there is something within our body, what we would call the soul or the life force, that goes on to some other realm of existence that I can accept. Like pearly gates and somebody saying, no, you've been bad, you've got to go down here, and ticking off, in the book or whatever. That, to me, is too over the top. But to come back to the point I was making, when you're dealing with, belief systems which are very, seriously cherished by, billions of people, never mind millions, it's not my place to come across like some ego-driven maniac saying, look, I'm right and you're wrong, and what you believe in is complete garbage. I don't do that for two reasons. One, it's not right to do it. And number two, the afterlife is a mystery to us. And that's why I prefer to say things along the lines of the ancient Greeks believed this because of A, B, C, and the Egyptians believe this because of X, Y, Z, and, in the biblical, it's 1, 2, 3. And for that reason, I think that's the responsible and respectful way to do it, because, as I said, none of us know what the truth is, and to claim that you do know the truth of life after death and what happens and the soul and everything else, anybody who says they know for sure, they're not, they're not sure. They might think they are, but what they've actually got is a strongly held belief system. And there's nothing wrong with that, providing people understand the difference between a fact and a belief system. And I don't believe it's right. I think it's totally fine to share belief systems and explain different belief systems, but it's wrong to force one on somebody. And that's what I don't do. I don't think it's right to force a belief system on the reader. Like, I'm not trying to indoctrinate the reader or program them. I'm just showing them things to think about and different theories, because that's what they are, theories.
Well, I think that is the mark of, and I'm not saying this to suck up, but I mean, I do think that's the mark of a true journalist and a true writer, is that you simply want to convey the, the facts, quote unquote, the historical perspectives, and allow people to make their own mind up as to what they want to believe. And I think, it is very difficult when talking to individuals many times for them to understand the difference between what is fact and what is faith. And I use the term faith not necessarily in a religious sense, but in that belief system that they're simply believing in something. And that faith versus fact for many people is very, very fuzzy many times. I know a lot of people that will start saying that they believe in fact, but what they're talking about is something that they do believe in, not because it can be proven or not because there's any concrete evidence, but because it's just a traditional way of thinking and it is very comfortable for them.
Yeah, I mean, to give you a sort of classic example, it's slightly off topic, but
there's no such thing as off topic with us.
Well, that's good. Back in 2003, my dog I had at the time, her name was Charity. She was a Shar-Pei, one of the wrinkly dogs. And she unfortunately passed away. It was her time, unfortunately. But in the immediate week afterwards, there was such a lot of really weird stuff happened. Like there was one, I'm not exaggerating. It was like a total. It was like walking through a wet dog smell in the duplex. It was kind of like I'd literally walked through a curtain. It was so powerful, and hearing like the pitter patter of claw nails on the tiled floor, and it also, I won't go into all the detail, but also a couple of really weird synchronicities that happened, and it honestly did make me think that for sort of the first sort of 4 or 5 days after she died, that some essence of her was still around, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then she was gone. And a lot of people get that, where when somebody dies, it's like there's some presence for a short period and then they go wherever they go. Now, some religions, like Christianity teaches that the only living creature that has a soul is a human. But, I don't care if I live to be 100. No one will convince me that Charity didn't sort of briefly stay around, or some essence of her didn't stay around. I'm absolutely sure it did, and I don't believe. Somebody once said, "Oh, well, that's a deceptive demon testing you." I don't believe that at all, because there was no evil angle to it, no bad outcome. It was just what it was, And so that's why I'm quite open-minded on, life after death. But I'm also open-minded on the fact that we really don't know what it is, and if with immortality, how that would tie in even. I mean, if we prevent the soul from moving on because we never die, is that going to become sort of some weird issue, Who knows?
Exactly.
Well, it's all conjecture until the fat lady sings.
There you go.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. Well, it's funny. There was a movie I remember seeing years ago. I can't remember if it was in the 70s or the 80s. And I think it was called Chiller. And it dealt with cryogenics, and it dealt with, this millionaire, I think it was a millionaire lady's son who died, and she had him cryogenically frozen and then brought back to life. And he came back physically to life, but he did not come back with his soul, because that had gone on to wherever. And so this person, this body, was walking around alive, breathing, functioning, but what had made them human had not come back with them. And I thought that was a very interesting take on immortality and the science of cryogenics at the time. Like I say, it was probably the late 70s, early 80s, very early in the whole concept of cryogenic freezing and things like that. But it was a very interesting take, I thought.
Well, I mean, when you look at immortality and the science behind it and how we might achieve immortality, there actually are a lot of things to think about, not just the fact that, I'm never going to have a wrinkle, anything like that, which is a good thing. But there are also the potential downsides. I mean, one of the things I talk about in the book, if, say, for example, you're immortal. You know, like today, we know we're all on a time limit of sort of 85, close, you know, or something like that today, around about the average all around the planet. But, you know, we're aware of that, and so we kind of embrace life and we live it and have a good time, and we all know it's going to happen, but you try and blot it out by really living your life. Well, you know, even if you're not immortal, let's say you have, you know, I know, 13,000 years, people could find themselves in a position where they don't bother doing anything because, well, I've got plenty of time, and they become sort of morose or lazy and don't do much at all because I've got plenty of time. Or life, you know, life to us is precious because you know, it doesn't last long, unfortunately, again, without being sort of a little bit down about it, which I'm trying not to be. But, you know...
kind of hard not to.
Well, but it's kind of a situation where we know we're on a limit, so we do have a good time. But the downside could be if you know you've got this immortal life, or it's almost as if life becomes over-precious, and you might find that people are so frightened of losing that 10, 15,000 years, you know, they never go on vacation, they never jump off a cliff into the ocean, you know, they never go drag racing or, you know, bike riding or whatever for fear that it's all going to be wiped out. You know, we do all that because, you know, life's a quick trip. But you could find people who are just, in the future, don't do things because either they've got so much time or this new gift they've suddenly been given so precious, they don't want to risk losing it. So they, you know, they stay inside fearful of whatever's going to happen to them, you know. And there's also like what's called the transhumanism angle or post-human angle, where perhaps physical flesh and blood immortality is not possible, or we just don't have the science to figure it out. But perhaps uploading people's memories and characters and personalities into, you know, some highly sophisticated computer, you know, sort of like a virtual reality world, you know, where we would all be living in sort of like a matrix world, you know. You could program whichever world you wanted to live in. But if you're not physical anymore, you're just memories and thoughts and your character living in this, like I said, like a, you know, a virtual world. Well, does that still make you human? You know, just because the memories are there, is it still you? Or is it a sophisticated electronic version of you and you can't prove that it wasn't you or it was you? You know, so or possibly we become sort of part human, part sort of robot, you know, like a cyborg, where more and more of us gets replaced by sophisticated technology. You know, your heart, your lung, your liver, your kidneys, your eyes. You know, who's to say we wouldn't go down that path to where we're more and more removed from, you know, what we are at birth?
I actually know some people who are pretty close to being that already.
Am not.
But I know. But I you know, it does, you know, when we talk about immortality, it does kind of, you know, are you talking about the immortality of the human form, the immortality of that life force, that soul, and then that does bring into the picture what defines humanity, what does make us human? Is it the outer person, or is it that inner you know, life force? What does define us as being human?
Well, so that's a good question, because everybody is different. You know, it's like, why is it somebody loves classical music, somebody loves reggae? You know, I mean, I grew up with punk music, and that's what I still love today. You know, I love loud, fast punk music. But why is that? You know, or why is it somebody likes steak, somebody else loves chicken? You know, why is it somebody loves to read books, somebody else loves soccer or baseball? You know, and why does somebody really laid back and somebody else flies off at the handle because the guy in front doesn't get away quick enough at the traffic lights? You know, that's me, by the way. But why is that? Why are we all so different? And, maybe that does come down to not just random firings in the brain, but because everybody does have sort of a different soul. Now, if you look back into some ancient religions, they believe that the soul had what was called like duality, where there was two parts to the soul. One which contained the sort of collective memories and experiences and character and everything else of the person. But the other one, which was more, it was just the like the nature of the soul. It was like the nature of the person without the memories. It was like, the style of character, things like that. And the theory was in some of these ancient cultures that when you die, the soul forgets the life it had, and the other part of the soul, which defines the basic nature of their character, but not the memories, gets sort of recycled into, a new human life form, a baby. So that's sort of the ancient concept with reincarnation, that it's like a cruel irony that if reincarnation's real, we actually do live forever, but we don't remember any of the earlier lives, which is almost, like I said, somebody's warped irony.
It is. Well, as you were talking about that, I was trying to remember if you addressed reincarnation and immortality of the gods, and I don't remember if you did or not. Well,
I do from that perspective, about talking briefly about how, there was this belief system that the soul doesn't remember, but it can be recycled. Now, I mentioned this in relation to alien abductions today. For example, Whitley Strieber in Communion, his best-selling Communion book, he talked about how the Greys that he met with, they told him that one of their main roles was recycling human souls. And you can find stories about soul separation and recycling in the works of people like the late John Mack and the late Bud Hopkins as well, even though a lot of what they were talking about was sort of the science of abductions, there was also this sort of spiritual aspect as well. Now, it's kind of connected to this, but in very different ways. The story I talk in the book about the Raelian people, this group of followers who follow this man named Claude Rael, a Frenchman who had sort of a classic contactee type experience with a human-looking alien in France.
But also kind of a messianic figure, is he not? I mean, it is the Raelians is kind of a bizarre mixture of ufology and religion.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Now, a lot of people don't realize and are quite surprised when they find out that the Raelians don't believe in any kind of soul at all. They believe, when you've had your 90 years, it's lights out and it literally is game over forever. But they believe that essentially there is reincarnation, but not how we would describe it. It's more the fact that they believe that in the creation or the growth of sophisticated clones of each and every one of us, then when we die or we get close to dying, or, our current clone, the body starts to degrade for whatever reason, that they're trying to figure out the science behind how perhaps our memories and thoughts and belief systems and everything else, our characters, could be uploaded, not into a machine, but into another clone. So, in other words, it's like, when a pair of sneakers wears out, you get a new pair of sneakers. For the Raelians, if they could understand the science and it could be achieved, it would be a case of getting a new clone of yourself every few years and, going into some sort of situation where your memories would be uploaded into this new clone and you would walk out 20 years younger again. And they believe that's the only way to sort of, survive. It's not like a real soul being reincarnated into a new body. It's the same memories and the same characteristic being uploaded into a new body. So it's kind of like reincarnation, but from a scientific angle rather than like a supernatural recycling.
Yeah, very interesting take. I've been familiar with the Raelians for several years. I wasn't familiar with that particular aspect of their belief system, but they are interesting to read about and to watch. they do have some interesting.
Regardless of what people think of them, they have sort of fascinating belief systems and culture and so on. And but again, it demonstrates the extent to which concepts like immortality and life after death and keeping it all at bay. We all around the world, everybody, I guess, at some point has thought about why have we only got 85 years? How can we change that? There's probably nobody who hasn't ever thought of that,
Right. Right. And those who do, we kind of find ourselves looking at them and going, what the hell did they do that they got more than 85? I mean, my great grandfather lived to be 99, and I remember he died when I was, I think, 13. And I remember thinking, at that point, what did this man do that he lived almost a century? And then, hearing about these people that lived to be 102 and 114, and that blows our mind. But then to talk about individuals like you mentioned from the Bible, Methuselah, and some of these other that, Methuselah lived 969 years, almost 1,000 years, that we can't even fathom that. To grasp what life would be like. I mean, think about, I look at people who live 100 years or more. Think about the things they have seen in 1 century. Well, think about what you see in 10.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And I think the important thing to sort of remember is that immortality really is only something we would want if we live to 500, you would want the process to be as slow as reaching 80 or whatever. You don't want us. What we don't want is to all reach 80 in the normal way we do now, and then you stay like that way for the next 400 years. That would not be
counterproductive.
Nothing against people who are 80, but you don't want to live like that for 400 years. You want to be 30 for 400 years.
Right. And really at that point, if you're living to be 1,000 years old, your midlife crisis is going to come when you're 500. I mean, so how do you cope with a 500-year-old midlife crisis? I don't even, we can't even fathom that. But ironically, we still strive for it.
Well, the thing is, I think for the people who are, if it's feasible and it's doable, the people who are born into it, they won't have known any different. It'll be normal to them. It's kind of like where we find it amazing that, say, 700 years ago, you could die because you got an infected little finger, and it spread, and there were no antibiotics then. We're like, wow, they only lived to 30 just because he, damaged his finger and it spread into his bloodstream. It could be, people, it's like now a lot of research is being done to, determine if one day we'll have, completely working artificial wombs where women won't give birth anymore. They'll, babies will be grown in tanks for 9 months. To us, that, a lot of people would find that a terrible thing, because the kind of the bonding process between the pregnant mom and the growing baby, is an important thing. But who knows, 200 years from now, women might say, oh, my God, I can't believe people put themselves through that for 9 months. But for
Absolutely.
us, it's like an important part of life, your memories of, your wife or your girlfriend getting pregnant and then, this baby comes into the world. I think from a scientific perspective, it's an interesting concept, but it would take away, I think, a lot of humanity, of our humanity, But for the people then, like I said, maybe they won't care what we think about 200 years, earlier or whatever.
Well, I mean, obviously, we're already not caring what we thought, a decade ago or 20 years ago when it comes to some things. And it's amazing how rapidly belief systems. A classic
example of that is, you look at the music industry, going from like vinyl to CDs, and then, all the music stores going out of business in no time at all, just because, we all download now.
Right. Absolutely.
Nobody could really foresee that. And when it happened, it was like with the click of a finger,
Yeah.
Stores were dropping like flies, and the music industry has radically changed, to the point where bands now are constantly on tour because they're just not selling CDs anymore. People are just picking and choosing one song off the album or whatever,
Right, and downloading it and putting, and mixtapes are, totally different concept now than they were when I was, in the 80s and 90s when I was growing up. You're just downloading songs and playing them. It's funny because you mentioned how that, the music industry changed, and entertainment in general has changed. I was joking with my son and daughter. My son's 14. My daughter my son just turned 14 in January. My daughter will be 13 in July, and they were watching Netflix one night. And I said, I said, when Netflix came out, I said, I remember you were just ordering the movie online, and they were sending you the DVD, and then you could watch it and you could send it back. And my son just looked at me and said, "Why would you do that?" Well, that's how it started out. That's what the concept was. You ordered the movie, you got it, you sent it back, they'd send you another one. He's like, "Well, that's just stupid." He said, "I can just go and watch it whenever I want to." Yeah, that's true.
That's right. And again, that kind of demonstrates how, we can't imagine what it might be like in the future to sort of alter our lifespans and our lifestyle, but we do see it happen around us. It's like when I was a kid, everybody after school was out on riding the bikes, and my mom and dad would just say, "Oh, be back by the time the sun sets." It'd be like 9 o'clock at night or something, and I was like 8 years old, and I'd get back and have grazed legs because I fell off the bike or whatever, and that was being a kid. But today, being a kid, it's almost like sitting in your bedroom texting, and I'm not being critical of kids who do that, because that's the world they're born into, but it shows how quickly our lives change in terms of what we perceive as lives and entertainment and everything else.
Well, in industry, like different manufacturing jobs, say, the actual people are being replaced by robotic computers now. Mm-hmm. Where do you go for a job? What are these people, making a decent wage? They're all being replaced. The manufacturers make more money. We make no money. That's very concerning.
You're right. I mean, I can find an easy way to solve the unemployment problem. It's get rid of these voices on the phone that say, press 1 for this, press 2 for that. And that's have a person who, as soon as you dial, you get to a real person.
You get to talk to someone.
Oh, wouldn't that be lovely again?
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that. That's one of the things I'll be happy to go back to.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting back to the actual book for just a second, there are 2 chapters in the book of Immortality of the Gods. Well, no, but it does kind of play into this of what we're talking about. There's 2 chapters that are nestled right together. One is called The Man Who Never Dies, and the other is called An Immortal in the Pentagon. And I think those are just 2 fascinating chapters that kind of really drive home this continued interest and infatuation that we have with the immortality. Tell us about The Man Who Never Dies.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a story that's sort of, again, like an intriguing one, but unlike a lot of the stories in the book, it's actually not one that dates back thousands of years. It actually goes back just a few centuries more than anything else. And it revolves around a man known as the Count of Saint Germain. And he was someone who surfaced in the 1700s in much of Europe. And he was somebody who became sort of like a legendary figure, almost, like one of today's celebrities. And he would travel around Europe. He seemed to have, never-ending amount of money and good clothes, and, women flocked to him left, right, and centre. And he cultivated this sort of air of mystery, and he moved, with powerful figures in royalty and government and so on. But the weird thing is that the Count of Saint Germain, when people would see him years later, like 10, 20 years later, he appeared not to have changed. He was still, young. And what's intriguing is that in the stories, people said they hardly ever saw him eat food, and he almost exclusively would live on what was described as like this mysterious tea. So again, you know, we've got somebody in the 1700s paralleling these thousands of years old stories of how, you know, people who got their hands on these mysterious cocktails could slow the aging process. And that's the story with the Count of Saint Germain. And there are stories about people claiming to have seen him in recent years, and all sorts of theories as to which identity he took on in which period, and there are even people who believe he existed as far back as the Egyptian era, ancient Egyptian era, and that every sort of century or 50 years he would adopt a new character so that people would be able to track him down and, you know, cause hassle for him or whatever. But the other story that you're talking about really sort of comes up to, you know, close to the present era at least, and it revolves around a man named Frank Stranges. Now, Frank Stranges was a guy who surfaced in the UFO field in the 1950s through the 60s for the most part, and then he sort of tailed off and became a bit of obscurity after that. But in the 50s and 60s, Frank Stranges was a big player in the contactee movement, and for people who aren't aware of what that is, contactees are people who, in the 50s and 60s, claimed contact with very human-looking aliens who would typically warn us about the threats of nuclear war and, you know, preserving the planet, that kind of thing. And according to Frank Stranges, he met this very human-looking alien that gave Stranges the name of Valiant Thor. Supposedly that was this alien character's name. There are a couple of photographs alleged to show him, and he looks about 35, sort of 1950s shortish, sort of slick back hairstyle, and a black suit, white shirt, and sort of skinny tie kind of thing. Now, a number of people, again, over the years, claim to have had contact with Valiant Thor in the same way they did with the Count of Saint Germain, and have said that when they've looked at the photograph in Frank Strange's book, he looks just the same today as he did then, the only difference being the fashion and the hairstyle, things like that. But they were sure it was the same person when he introduced himself. So, you know, in that sense, we've got stories that sort of eerily parallel, you know, those from ancient Greece or ancient India, of people who had found a way, or sort of demigods or extraterrestrials, however you want to term them, who had also found a way to not age even a day over, say, you know, over a period of 30 years. So I put those two in to demonstrate that, this story isn't just revolving around, the time when the periods were new or whatever. It actually also focuses on the present era, and kind of on this same angle, pushing things down like a conspiracy angle. I talk about some rumours that I picked up over the years, where people were talking about like a secret global elite that was trying to figure out the answers to immortality, so where the rest of us, the cattle, get our 80 years, this sort of secret order of global elite people, almost like a secret society running the planet. They were looking and have been looking to tap into the secrets of immortality to, allow them to sort of keep on living, like I said, while the rest of us aren't given access to whatever it is they're looking for.
It brings to mind like the picture of Dorian Gray, where Dorian,
I love that story. That's one of my favorite movies.
Yes. His soul withers and dies in the mirror, and Dorian continues. I wonder if that might be a factor as well. It just makes you wonder things.
Well, who can say? One of the parallels I would draw with the picture of Dorian Gray is that, whereas, his image in the painting grows old and he stays young. But I have sometimes wondered, if we do achieve immortality, what if the body ages? The body is unaging, but what if the brain does age at a faster rate? So that would be like, a worst case scenario, that you remain 25 for 100 years, but you're already an old man at 24 in your mind, you know. So there could be like this inward and outward difference between how the person looks versus, their character. So I think if we do ever go down that path, it's going to be sort of like a hit and miss thing until we actually get what it is we're looking for, and if you're one of the early misses, you might not have a particularly good few years.
Right, yeah. Or be so terribly psychologically damaged to begin with that you become a real and true nightmare.
Well, and that was the thing.
Not impossible. It's not impossible.
No, not
that
at all.
Could happen.
No.
Because, with animal cloning, when, for example, in England quite a few years back now, when they started doing research into cloning and cloning sheep, for example, the sheep began to suffer quite adversely, where they would develop these conditions where the body would age at a quicker rate, and they develop tumours that you would only normally see in like a sheep when it was much older, and in later life. Mm-hmm. So there are dangers in going down that cloning path because, as much as we would all like to have sort of 500 years or 1,000 years, whether you believe in like divine intervention or you believe in science, there's still a reason as to why our upper limit is like 85. There's still a reason for it. And when you try and, very often, when you try and tamper with the natural order, sometimes the natural order hits back.
Tampers back, yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, a classic example of this is, I know this from sort of growing up in the UK as a kid, when in the 80s the whole mad cow thing kicked off, and the British government panicked, and, well, they didn't panic. What they did, they killed, nearly the entire nation's cattle herd because of this dangerous disease. And then they wiped out the rest and got in a real panic when it jumped from cows to people. You had CJD, which was the mad cow disease, and then you had, you had mad cow disease, and then you had the human equivalent, which was basically came from, people eating infected cows. Now, one of the primary reasons why this all kicked off was because in the slaughterhouses, again, it's quite slightly off topic, we understand why I'm getting to it, and farms, what was happening was that the dead cows were being grounded up and their meat was being fed to the cows. Now, cows eat grass. They were basically being made to eat dead comrades, the same species, cows. And so what happened was we went away from the natural order. Cows were eating cows, and then suddenly you have this almost spontaneous development of this really weird disease, which ended up with, quarantine for all the animals before being killed, people in a panic that they were now infected. It was kind of like the closest thing you could imagine to like the zombie virus, are we all infected, that kind of thing. Right. So when you go against that natural order, you do find very often that nature does something which, throws it all into chaos because we're not really meant to be doing it.
Counteracts.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, then I guess you have... Oh, go ahead, Travis, please.
No, go. I hogged like the entire first hour, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just sat back and listened. It's very informative, very nice to listen to. So, yeah. Where did I go? Oh, okay, back to, you have the... Okay, I've lost it, but Philosopher's Stone. The magical side of it, and it's probably all fantasy and silly, but I mean, it is a alchemical solution to immortality. Yes, a lot like the mana and the whole bit.
Yeah, I mean, you can find parallels, you can find connections and sort of things that are suggestive of all this. It's whether or not we can achieve it, and if we can, should we? And if we should, how do we go about doing it? So it isn't just the secret of, like I said, some global elite that wants to rule everybody else. And, and there's also the practical issues. If nobody ever dies, the planet's soon going to fill up with people. I mean, to the point where there'll be no room. Now, that sort of raises the question, if we have real immortality where we just literally do not die, unless, something like an aircraft landed on top of you, which is obviously going to kill you. You're not
Right.
going to regenerate. You would be dead if you got a bullet in the brain. That's still going to kill you. Immortality
Probably.
basically would be your body would stay as it is, but you could still die or be killed. If you're hit by a truck or whatever. But the thing is, if we do achieve immortality and nobody dies anymore and the planet starts to fill up, does that mean then people will be banned from having children? Will we live in a world where there is nobody like under the age of 25? Because when the rules were put into place, that this 25 years later, that the rules were put into place, no more kids. 25 years down the line, there are no babies. There are no children. There are no schools because everybody is like a 25-year-old adult and frozen in that stage. So there are things like that where, as I said, that sort of, you have that sort of dehumanizing aspect to it as well, where did we really want to do that? We got a million years, but nobody gives birth. There are no children. There's nothing. It could be like a grim world.
Very much so.
Very much so. Well, what do we do with immortality? I mean, we're not a very responsible species to begin with. What do we do with immortality? I mean, I think that brings up a whole series of questions. Because, like I said, we are not the most responsible. Yeah. We don't seem to care. We have no, empathy or compassion already. How would being immortal alter that? Would it make us better? Would it make us worse?
I don't know if it would make us better or worse. I think it would just change us. Like I said, there would be that angle of, well, there's no point doing it today because what does it matter if I do it tomorrow or next week because I've got all the time in the world. So people might just become lazy and morose. They might be fearful of losing this gift, so they develop a phobia of jumping off a springboard in a swimming pool or whatever because they're frightened of everything because what we take for granted becomes such this precious gift that they're so fearful of losing it suddenly. And you put all that kind of stuff together and you wonder, well, maybe 85 is just a good thing, If you go in your sleep, after a good night out, that's the way to do it.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So basically we're looking at immortality, lethargy. So basically a bunch of everlasting teenagers is basically what we're looking at. People that have no initiative, no get up and go about them. They're no
ambition,
no ambition whatsoever. So.
But it could be also, just a sort of population of just morose adults as well. Where you've just got no drive because it doesn't matter. I could do it the next million years and I'll still be here. That kind of thing.
I'll put it off till tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you were talking about, the zombie virus. Does it already exist within us? Well, if you looked at the last presidential election, yes, it does. It's already there.
If you look at the zombie parallels, they're sort of these, the zombies live forever, providing they just keep eating. They keep on going. They're relentless. And their humanity's gone. And maybe in a strange way, we wouldn't be literal zombies, in the way they're portrayed in the movies or TV shows, but we could be zombies in the sense that we're just brain dead because what's the point of doing anything, So it's like we look forward to our 2-week vacation per year or whatever because it's coming around, and we have to work the rest of the time, so we look forward to it. Well, if everybody's immortal and, who knows how many people would even be working then, because there's only a limited number of jobs. Well, it's like even your vacation, you're not going to look forward to it because you're not doing anything other than vacationing anyway, just sitting around doing nothing. So.
Exactly. Exactly. So, well, we've got like 15 minutes or so left, Nick. I want to talk about the second book that you have out, which is 365 Days of UFOs. And it really is a very different type of book because it really is just kind of, like I said, kind of a coffee table book. You just pick it up. You can choose any date. For example, what's today's date? We're looking at
22nd, isn't it?
February 22nd. Mm-hmm. So if I flip to February 22nd,
which is exactly what I'm trying to do right now.
Yeah, I was going to say you have the title as A Changing Helicopter from Puerto Rico. Now, what I love about this book is, these are UFO stories, alien encounters from all over the world, from various times. So, for example, this is on page 65 in the book. So you've got February 22nd, 1997 is this incident. Right below it is February 23rd, 1975, and you go from Puerto Rico to England. So, I mean, this book literally is just this, hodgepodge, crisscrossing of places and people and years and eras and decades. How difficult was it to actually put this together?
Well, it actually wasn't that difficult at all. I'll tell you for why, because, there's over the years there have been tens of thousands of UFO reports, and there's only 365 days in a year. So in other words, you can find actually dozens of UFO cases for each day. But what I wanted to do with the book was kind of like with the Immortality book. You want to be able to give the reader something new. So, yeah, obviously, I'm going to put the famous ones in there, like, for example, Roswell or Rendlesham Forest in England or the Betty and Barney Hill abduction case. You've got to put those cases in. But what I also wanted to do was, because there's 365 days, was to also present the reader with a lot of cases that had really hardly ever been aired before. If they had, it was so long ago, some little obscure book written in the 50s that people wouldn't know about it anyway. But a lot of the cases are ones that were in my files and archives, which people had given to me and generously allowed me to use them, but they didn't really fit in, the concept of any of the previous books I was doing. But when the concept is just events on specific days, I could apply all those to the book. So, there's probably 2/3 of the book, the stories are all brand new. And what I wanted to do also was keep it varied for the reader. So, like you said, January the 1st might be a crop circle case. January 2 might be a man in black encounter. January 3 might be somebody who saw a dead alien, on a slab in a military base. But the first case might be 1965, the second one could be 72, the third one could be 2012 or whatever. And each case has got roughly about, I guess on average, about 2/3 of a page on each case, perhaps a little bit more in some of them, a little bit less in others. But to keep the reader entertained by constantly jumping, to different topics, but keeping each topic interesting as well. And so there's 365 cases in there. Somebody did say to me, what about leap years? I was like, well, we're not worrying about leap years.
Oh, that's just getting picky.
That's just going to confuse things even more. I'm not calling the book 366 Days of UFO.
Now, it's ironic that we chose February 22nd because this is actually a personal account by you.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about the story.
Well, yeah, I mean, this actually relates to the first time I went to Puerto Rico looking for the Chupacabra in 2004. And get back to cryptozoology, being one of probably my all-time favorite subject to write and research about. I've been to Puerto Rico a lot of times looking for the Chupacabra, which was originally reported from Puerto Rico in the mid-90s. Now, the first time I went there, which was with a crew from the Sci-Fi Channel in the summer of 2004, we interviewed a lot of people who'd seen the Chupacabra and seen UFO sightings, had UFO sightings in conjunction with where they saw the Chupacabra at the same time. And one of the people was a woman named Jamie, and she'd seen this strange helicopter, like a black helicopter that people report. If you look at these things like alien abductions and cattle mutilations, people often report seeing black helicopters in conjunction with these experiences that they have. Now, in Jamie's case, what was seen was like a black helicopter, but it suddenly sort of morphed or shape-shifted into this strange ball of light. Now, as weird as it sounds, I've probably got altogether about 15 or 16 cases like that, and I think 3 of them are in the book, where people had seen, like on the island of Puerto Rico, what appeared to be like a black helicopter. It looked just like one, but then it sort of, as I said, morphed into this ball of light, which has given rise to the theory that these black helicopters are actually nothing of the sort, and it's actually sort of UFOs projecting the image as a form of camouflage so they can move among us and not be seen. Now, it's sort of a radical theory, but when you realize that there are stories of these sort of shape-changing helicopters all across the planet in conjunction with UFO sightings, it does make me wonder if that's exactly what's going on.
No, I can see that, absolutely. I mean, the whole helicopter phenomenon has been part of ufology for years. Whether it was, the military helicopters or black helicopters or unmarked helicopters. I mean, it's just always kind of been there. Black ops, exactly. And then for you to have this kind of experience, I just thought it was kind of funny that we chose February 22nd to look at 365 days, and it's not just February 22nd, but hell, it's Nick Redfern's February 22nd. This is a personal account that you have had that you included.
Yeah, I think there's probably about 20 cases in the book where I talk about things that I personally, not experienced, but where the people I spoke to personally, rather than it being a second or third hand. And I did that not for ego or anything like that. It was just purely, I think people appreciate it when they know the story's coming first hand. It's not like my grandfather's uncle's next door neighbour's milkman told me, you know what I mean, or something like that.
Right. Well, that's why I like this particular book, because you can sit down and, if you want to read it from beginning to end, you can, or you can sit down and you say, okay, today's February 22nd. I'm going to see what happened. Almost like a journal, diary, or devotional kind of book. Or you can sit down and say, okay, you know what, because I remember looking back, because my birthday was January 24th. So I'm like, okay, let's see what January 24th holds. And, you had, ironically, you have no idea. On so many levels, for so many people, that was a bad day. But ironically, for January 24th, you chose 2015. So just a couple of years ago. And ironically, it was Asheville, North Carolina, which is only about 2 hours away from where I live.
Oh, cool.
So, I'm like, okay, this is actually kind of cool, and it's just, there's no way, I did not tell Nick to put that in the book. It's just one of those, those interesting layers to the book. If you sit down and just choose a date, you might really be surprised at what pops up when you choose one of these dates.
I enjoy reading books like that. Sometimes, I'll get like a publisher might send me a review copy of, the A to Z Encyclopedia of Roswell or something like that. And it is kind of fun just to sort of kick back and, let's dip into page 50, then I'll look into 95, and rather than having to go from page 1 to 300, which you don't have to do, sometimes it's more fun just to pick them at random and just see, what happened on your wife's birthday, or on your grandparents' birthday, just see what cropped up there. Like you said, is there some sort of little coincidence or synchronicity even going on with it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just kind of fun. That's what I like about this book. It's like I said, it's a very different, and it's like you said, maybe a third or 2/3 given to, sometimes a half a page. You've got one. Let's see. This is August 27th. which was Beckenham, Kent, England, a military veteran speaks. This is actually a page and a half. It's probably one of the longest. There's a couple that are like that.
Yeah.
But it's some longest ones that are in there. But most of them are like, a third or a half page that you devote to a particular day in a year. Now,
yeah, and of course,
360.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, because, there are 365 days in a year, that's why it's sort of substantially longer, because, there are a few there's a couple of like quite brief ones, but for the most part I've kept them to sort of like 2/3 of a page or whatever. But when you're doing that, it is going to be much longer than, the other book, the Immortality book. But in saying that as well, you don't want it to be overly long, like 600 pages, and you just saturate the reader. I think, that's sometimes the issue I have, particularly with conspiracy books, not so much UFOs or cryptozoology, but very often people, publishers will send me a conspiracy-themed book, like who shot Kennedy, who killed Kennedy, that kind of thing. And for some reason, conspiracy books always seem to run to like 600 or 700 pages, and it can be sometimes like mind-numbing just trying to take in, who was at Dealey Plaza and who shot from here and there, and not to come across like some dimwit or whatever, but it can just be, a problem when you're tasked with reading a 700-page book,
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't write 700-page books.
Yeah, you spread them out over 3 books or 4 books.
Yeah, there you go.
because I was a publicist for a lot of independent authors, self-published authors, and I'm like, don't put everything into one book. Spread it out. Let's get, you got a lot of information. Let's make it 3 or 4 or 5. Let's sell these things and then
lure them in and keep selling.
Keep them going. Now, one real quick question about 365 Days of UFOs did you sit down and compile these specifically for this, or are these things that just kind of have come your way over the years?
No, a lot of them were ones that I'd got on file, and like the change in helicopter/UFO story from Puerto Rico in 2004. That one really didn't sit in any of the books that I was working on. The only thing that made it relevant to this book was the fact that I knew the specific date, or the witness remembered the specific date when the event occurred. Mm-hmm. So, that was really the way I did it. Now, I didn't sort of write them January 1 to December the 31st, which, with hindsight, I should have done. It'd be much easier. I just dug out the first cases that I knew were handy and just wrote those. And then, of course, I had to realise afterwards I've got to keep going through the Word document to find out which ones I haven't done yet, which was a pain.
So what is Nick Redfern working on now?
Well, I've got a book out in actually next week. It actually sounds like I've done a bunch of books all at the same time, but actually haven't. It's because what's happened is that having done sort of I've done about 40 books over the last 20 years altogether, which is when I started writing. And because I'm with 4 or 5 different publishers, very occasionally, it doesn't happen often, but occasionally, every few years, they'll all put books out pretty much the same time. But the books have actually been sitting on the shelves or the manuscript in the publisher's office maybe for 6 or 7 months. But then they all decide to put them out together. So it looks like I've written them all together. And so the one that actually comes out next month is like an A to Z book on secret societies. So it's got, the well-known ones like the Illuminati and things like that. But it's also, again, got a lot of really obscure things like witchcraft cults and dragon cults and things like that. And
fun stuff.
That one will be out in March. And then in September, I've got one called Shapeshifters coming out with Llewellyn, and that's all to do with strange creatures that shapeshift. Everybody thinks of werewolves, the traditional legends of the werewolves, but you can find throughout history and culture legends of different sort of magical and supernatural creatures that could alter their form. Like in Native American lore, you've got the coyote, which could take on different forms, and the skinwalkers. and goblins and fairies. So it's like it's like a chapter by chapter study of
ex-wives. Oh wait, I'm sorry. Did I
I better not get into that. I'll get into trouble.
Yeah, I know. I had to toss that one out. I'm sorry.
I'm not an ex-wife.
But so that's basically the theme of that one, is like a history of shapeshifters, and there's obviously a werewolf or two chapter in there. But again, kind of like with the A to Z book, I wanted to present the reader with a lot of ones they may have heard of, like for example, were-cats instead of werewolves, where reports of people having the magical ability, like witches, to change into cats, things like that. So, and also like in Africa, you have these leopard cults where they would essentially like dress in the skins of leopards and create these fake claws and go out and murder people centuries ago. And it wasn't literal shape-shifting, but it was sort of taking on the guise of the leopard and the appearance of the leopard. So, it covers all sorts of different aspects like that, and that'll be out in September.
Well, we definitely, I know you're on this month, but I would love to have you come back on to discuss, the Secret Societies book. And then in September.
Well, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Yes, please do. And because we would love to have you come back on it, because I love the concept of secret societies.
Well, again, it's one way you can dip into wherever you like. You don't have to sort of start at A for this and end at Z for that. So.
Exactly. Just kind of pick it up, and you can go Z to A if you want,
Now, are you going to share those books?
In there, actually.
Travis doesn't share his hard copy books at all.
That's not true. I try to get them sent to you. I do. I just happen to be on the list. He was talking. Llewellyn. Actually, one of my authors that I represented was being published by Llewellyn. So I actually, I've done some work with Llewellyn.
I like Llewellyn. They're a good bunch to work with, and
they are.
I've done 3 of my previous books, and then I said they'll be doing the Shapeshifters one in September.
But yeah, if we could get, and I'll be in touch with you if we could get copies, that'd be great. Wendy and I both will read them, and we'll get you back on, and maybe sometime in March to discuss that one, and we're going to book you for September too to get you to come on and talk about shapeshifting.
Oh, great stuff.
You talked about the werecat thing. Actually, is very funny because in the area that I live in Virginia, there actually is a Native American legend and a cryptid that's called the Wampus Cat.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's very prominent in this area. It's one of those things, not a lot of people are familiar with it unless you really get into hardcore cryptozoological, enthusiasts. Then we've heard about it, but it's actually a really interesting kind of concept. So I would love to have you come back on and discuss that. Yeah. So,
if I could ask, where would, say, the Dogman fall? It's not really werewolf, but then again, kind of is. I'm just curious about that.
I've got a couple of stories in there where, I've sort of drawn parallels between the fact that, the Dogman does, to a degree, resemble a werewolf. So, I sort of draw that parallel that it's, Dogman is sort of like a more modern day term for werewolf, but it doesn't have sort of all the connotations of like, a full moon and silver bullets and all that kind of thing attached to it. It's sort of just more of like a bizarre, strange wolf-like animal that can apparently walk on 4 legs and 2. So I do talk about it in that sense. Yeah.
Oh,
very cool. Yeah,
look forward to that.
Yeah, because we had help me out, Wendy. Linda Godfrey has been on several times. Yeah, yeah, she is very cool. And actually, I think you and Linda did you both do a Dogman conference? Is that?
Yeah, that was put on by a friend of mine, Ken Gerhard, and that was in Defiance, Ohio, back in August, because of the famous werewolf sighting in there in the 70s, and so that was a cool conference. Ken was a bit worried as to how he might turn up, but he needn't have worried. It was like jammed. It was like really successful. People loved it, I think, because nobody had ever done a Dogman conference before. So.
It is. It's very cool, and Linda is great. We've had her Wendy twice. or 3 times?
Twice,
Twice.
We talked about the third, but it just didn't quite manifest.
Yeah. We actually ended up taking a hiatus toward the last part of the year, so we need to have her back on. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Nick, as far as getting in touch with you, ordering books, and maybe if people want to report, sightings, cryptids, UFO phenomena, things like that, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I have a blog which is called Nick Redfern's World of Whatever. And so if you just type that into a search engine, you'll see the link. And if you go to the blog, just scroll down the right. There's a contact section there, which will take you to my Facebook page, and people can contact me there by message. And I'm always happy to chat with people. And if they've got any questions or want to share stories, again, I'm happy to help if they want advice, or just to talk about something they've seen or experienced. And there are a few Nick Redferns on Facebook, but just scroll down and see the one who's got the black biker jacket and the skull bandana, and that's me. So.
I love that picture. That's a great headshot. It really is. Nick, thank you so much for being with us on the program tonight.
Thanks, guys. Well, thanks for having me on again.
It has been a blast, and we do want to have you back on to talk about the secret societies and the shapeshifters in September. So I'll be in touch with you, trying to get that booked up.
All right, that sounds good. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week.
You too. See you later.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye-bye.
So, Wendy, how are we being taken out tonight?
We have echo.
We did have echo.
It's gone now.
It is. How are we being taken out tonight? It's been a great show. I love Nick. I absolutely love getting into conversations with him. I'm sorry I hogged on like 2/3 of the program. But I will say,
you are the more learned of us, between the two of us. The questions to ask, and I'm just sitting there going, well, this is cool stuff. I like it.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to change my name to Valiant Thor, because that is just a fucking awesome name. And we're going to change the name of the show to the Valiant Thor Hour. So I'm just going to lay that out there right now, because I want that name.
I dub the Valiant Thor.
I've heard the story of Valiant Thor before, but it was so funny hearing Nick say it. I'm like, you know what? I want that name. I've never wanted a name, but I want to be Valiant Thor.
Okay.
I'll change the spelling. I don't care. I just want that name, and we'll change the name of the show. But anyway, we will have Nick back on probably in March. We'll talk about the secret societies. We'll book him for September, and we are working on programs. Do we have next week booked? You know what my week's been like.
I was trying to remember, and I think we do, but I don't remember who it is.
It's a group of your friends, isn't it?
That's not until the 15th.
Is this a group of your enemies?
We will have, Ross Allison. Pardon me?
Is this a group of your enemies next week? We could get a group of my enemies on. I don't care. I mean, they would love to come on and talk about me.
We could, but then we'd have to, pull our mafia
that's true, we would.
Persona out.
It's true, we would.
I think I was going to try to get another author, but I between a few different things that have gone on, I have neglected to do so thus far. But I will get on it.
Well, we will see. We'll have to look at the schedule. Like I said, this has just been a crazy week. I don't even really know how I'm still awake and how I'm still functioning at this point. But
it's your awesome co-host.
That's what it is. It's the power of Wendy.
That's right.
But we will be posting who the guest is for the show next week on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Spreaker.com. Please message us. Let us know what you think about the show. Give us some show ideas. If there's an author, if there's a guest that you would like to have on the show, we have absolutely no shame. We will do whatever it takes to get someone on this program. So just, tell us who you want to have on the show. Tell us what subject you would like to have us discuss or talk about. You can email us. It's mysticmooncafe@gmail.com.
Yes.
You can send us a direct message on Twitter. It's mysticmoonc. or it's at Mystic Moon C, rather,
Right.
On Twitter. And then, of course, we are on Facebook at Mystic Moon Cafe and Mystic Light and Shadows. There are 2 pages for
Correct.
the program. So please feel free to message us. Let us know what you think about the show. Let us know what you would like to see changed, what you would like to see included. Guests, topics, things like that. We are open, so please feel free to do so at any time. So that is pretty much all I've got, Wendy. Lady, how about you?
I believe that's all I've got as well. And I'm not sure that we have a song this evening, but we do have our exit, promo that you put up.
Well, then let's play the exit, and we will be back next week on Mystic Moon Cafe.
Sounds
have a
good.
great week.
You too.
Thank you for joining us tonight. You've been listening to Mystic Moon Cafe. Join us every Wednesday from 9 to 11 p.m. Eastern. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. On behalf of Wendy Schindler, this is Travis Short saying have a great rest of your week.